give us a brief introductory about yourself to see how you've progressed through the Sebastopol breeding?
Yes, I'm Terry Lund. I and my daughter and my son and my wife live in Brooklyn, Wisconsin, in the United States, and we started in our Sebastopol breeding about 20 years ago. We just happened to come across a pair of goslings, and that's how it started. And we've progressed since then. We've only added a couple of birds over the years, otherwise we've kept a pretty tight group. So because of that, it takes a lot of record keeping, and we toe punch and band our birds and keep track of everything. My daughter keeps track of most of that, and we have 8 breeding pens right now, typically just pairs, some trios. We typically do quality over quantity. There's a lot of people that breed a lot of birds, but we just don't have the room for all of that, so we strive to keep everything at a lower number, so we can really keep track of everything and give the Sebastopols that we raise the best opportunity to reach their full potential, because they're pretty needy when it comes to space and care to keep that feather quality high. We've been showing for pretty much 20 years, and we've won champion goose, reserve goose of show many times, champion overall at the APA National back in 2018 out in Shawnee, Oklahoma. The Ohio National typically has a couple hundred geese, and we've been on champion row with the Sebastopol numerous times over the years, so it's been a really fun experience.
Nice. And then, so with your feather quality, Terry, how do you improve that with your lines?
With our line, we found that the quality was pretty good from the get-go, but we wanted it to be more profuse up on the chest, and some of the feather was a little narrow, which typically in the United States they call it stringy. Instead of being feather and a little bit wider, it looks kind of narrow, and it's just kind of like the shaft all the way down with not much feather quality. So we did bring a really good smooth-breasted gander in years ago that had really wide, profuse feathering off of his back. Nothing on his chest, of course, but that you have to keep really, really good records, because you don't want to cross that in too many generations. But if you cross it in one generation, every now and then your feather width really improves, but then you have to make sure you don't breed that line back in relatively quickly, otherwise you're gonna produce a lot of smooth-breasted offspring, and of course they're not in the standard in the United States, so you can't show them. Even though they are beautiful, and a really good smooth-breasted goose or gander is extraordinary looking, and we still have a really nice gander that we're not using him this year, but probably again next year we will.
Yeah. So I'm just going to show an example up on the screen with the camera. So this one here that I'm waving, that is the feather width that we need to try and aim for with our Sebastopols. So when they get longer, you can see that's why you need that width for when they split and curl. And here's an example here of one that we need to try and improve. So you can see the difference in the width when I pull that up there as well. So that's sort of the example of what Terry's talking about. So when we have those feathers and we introduce a smooth-breasted who has significantly wider feathering, that will then give you this outcome. So this is what we're trying to get across today, about all the genetics, all the different lines, just how we can improve on the Sebastopols that we've got, not only here in Australia, but in the UK and the US as well. Yeah. Yeah, so feel free to pop any questions in the chat. Yeah, and we can answer them along the way. If we don't get time, we can always answer them at a later date.
Can I just ask Terry while we're just on the
Yeah,
feathers?
sure. Sorry, Terry. So this is Claire from the UK. She's a special internationalist judge that was invited to judge here at the Sydney Royal Easter Show.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, I've heard a lot about you. You're upside down on the phone, so I can't really see what you look like.
As to get the volume across a bit better.
While we're talking about the feathers, I would like you to answer, do you get transparency in the feathers?
You're a little echoey on your end. What was that question, Melissa?
No, move it closer.
She's just coming closer.
I'm too old for technology, but I wanted to know whether I've got a feather in my hand. I don't know whether you can see it, and it's very transparent.
If Melissa can turn her video on, I might be able to see it on her phone.
Can you show them that? That's how transparent. That's what we were talking about compared to the other ones.
Like
So
Facebook.
see on here, see how we can see that that's really transparent, very thin. It's not as a solid. Can you see that okay, Terry, or not really? The variance.
No, because see, I'm on the messenger call.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
sorry, hang
I think
on.
you've got to do FaceTime.
Put the video on the phone, yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
No,
let me
no,
turn
no,
that
no.
over.
That's okay. There we go. Now I can see.
Yeah, so we have this one here that is quite nice and full. And then we have one, sorry people that are online, and you can see that it's very transparent.
Correct.
Yeah,
So you do get that in the US?
You do. Yep, and it's really hard to get away from because of the feather mutation that the Sebastopols have. But when you get really stringy feather, where it's really narrow, and then all it is like the shaft down the center with just a little bit of feathering on the edge. You know, that thing when it's breeding, it's sometimes, you know, the nutrition of the grain that they keep getting fed, and also just the quality of the pen that they're in.
Well, that was going to lead me to my next question. Would you say that would be affected by a protein level in the feed, or would it be within the breeding of the?
It's probably a combination of the protein, the breeding, and the quality of care that they're getting in the housing that they're in.
Correct.
There's a lot of people in the United States that really don't dabble with Sebastopols because if they have them on a dirt lot, you can't show them anywhere because their feathers are so filthy dirty.
Yeah, I do
You know, we
understand
do
that.
have some dirt
Yeah.
holes. Yeah, but the majority of ours are on grass pasture.
Correct, right. So sometimes that can be
But you don't,
with protein
Correct, but you
level
don't want to-
even.
yeah, but you don't want a too high of a protein because geese, you know, 16 to 18% is pretty much what we feed. We feed an 18% pellet year round, and then we mix in whole oats during the fall and summer.
Gotcha.
Just
Yeah.
to cut it down a little bit because you don't want them, you know, producing too fast as far as maturing because then their feathers, their wings will get really bad sometimes and then they stick straight out like angel
Exactly, and
wings. You don't
that
want
is the
that.
protein, the over protein
Yep.
level. That
Well,
the-
we find that it's over protein. Some people
Yeah.
argue that it's not, but my personal thing is it is too high of a protein.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't breed them now. I have kept them, but I'm big into feathers, and feathers tell me a lot. And I can tell through my breed's a chicken. It's a Polish, but it's the still same thing with frizzling in the feather. And if I used to give too much protein, then the feather would tell me in the bird itself. you know, the level of
Yep.
where I needed to go, whether I needed more or less, or correct it somewhere along the line. So that's all I wanted to ask you. So sorry to interrupt everything, but that's what,
Oh, no, you're
just while
fine.
we were on feathers, it was in my head.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, that's really good. Don't.
Yes.
So, Terry and Michael Peel, what's your thought on the feathers? And in Australia here, the shaft of the feather, the shorter we've got it coming out of the body, it's a bit like the hair on our head. It just naturally hangs. If the shaft coming out is too strong, this end of the feather, I don't know whether you can see that. But the main shaft that carries the feather, the shorter that shaft and hollow, when the feather, it's still got to produce the feathering on each side of it, but it'll drop a lot quicker, and it avoids getting the feathers sticking out, you know, which we try to eliminate, and all breeders would, I would think. What's your thought?
Yep. Yes. Yeah, I mean, the shorter the shaft, close to the body, I definitely agree with you, Michael. You don't want it to be stiff, because then those feathers are going to stick up,
Yes.
and you still want them to look fluffy.
Yeah.
But if you have the shafts are way too thick, then they're going to look like a normal feather.
Yeah.
They're going to look rough.
Yeah, Melissa's got feathers that are hollow, a lot of the feathers, and that allows it to drop straight away, and the more feathering you get on it, it just drops and hangs like an Angora goat when you go to the animal sort of thing. They're just dropping ringlets, and that's what we're trying to produce, I feel, with these Sebastopols.
Yes, because some of those feathers that are off of the backs of the Sebastopols, I mean, they're 24 inches long. I mean, they'll come out of their back, and then they go up, and they drag right on the ground.
Yes. Graham, you got any questions there?
Yeah.
Hi,
Graham
Terry.
Hicks.
Hi, Terry. It's Graham Hicks from UK.
Yes.
I was done several visits over to America in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
There were some lovely Sebastopols then in the 90s. Where did your bloodline come from?
Our first pair we picked up from a gentleman and fellow poultry judge and breeder and friend, Butch Gunderson,
Yeah.
in Portage, Wisconsin, Erling Gunderson. That's where we got our first pair from.
Yeah.
And then we added a pair from Audrey Overton years ago.
Yeah. We've got.
Yeah, she's no longer with us. She's passed away.
Yeah. Our man in England, our Sebastopol man, Steve Days, brought in bloodlines from the Overtons. Gary and Audrey,
Oh, yes.
Steve Days.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And he's mixed more together with the European German and the English and he's been the king of Sebastopols for the last 10 years.
He's got some really nice birds. I've seen pictures on Facebook.
Yeah, unfortunately, he's announced his retirement next month. So he's going to sell all his 100 Sebastopols.
Well, hopefully they get into some good hands.
But I think I'll have to get some back. Anyway, the wing flights, which is a big question, is how we're going to reduce the this wing flight feathering. Today, obviously, this weekend I've judged the geese here in Australia, and the winner Sebastopol has minimal goose wing fault, and some of them are actually standing up through the feathers, through the ribbons that are coming through the back, which is I would discourage that. Would you?
Yeah, we tried to get away from that type of breeding, and typically if it's just the last little digit on their wingtip, that last little digit, I think it's called the phalanx or something, typically if that's twisted, you typically can't really see it if you have a really good quality curly goose.
Yeah.
But if you've got more, like the whole end of it, like the first and second digit is twisted, then sometimes they'll get it to show out. And even though in our standard it's not a DQ, it's they say it's just a defect.
Undesirable.
If you make it to champion row, it's still going to probably get overlooked because it just looks bad when those feathers are sticking out.
Yeah. I mean, the worst, the ones today, the ones that were really bad, I would class them as undesirable, so I didn't put them, I sort of faulted them a little when I judged them.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, when we go through our birds and even birds at the shows, we look at the whole bird and look at their wing, and if you've got one that clearly's got, protruding feathers sticking out, and the one next to it doesn't, your eyes go to the one that doesn't have the feathers sticking out, the wings sticking out, even though it's so hard to get away from because they've got the mutation that gives them that curl, it gives them that twisted feather, kind of like a frizzled chicken.
Yeah. So have you nearly got rid of it in America, or is they still keep?
Oh no, it's everywhere. It's really, you have, see, that's the thing is if you're going to breed Sebastopols, you have to keep such good records of what lines seem to produce feathers that do protrude out, because there's so many that you see at a show that have the feathers that stick out, and it almost looks like it could be angel wing versus a twisted wing, because they'll stick like way out of their body.
Yeah.
Are you
And we see that all the time.
Terry, would you be able to give your definition of what you consider to be twisted wingtip versus angel wing?
To me, twisted wingtip is just the very tip of, like, if you pull the feather off the wing all the way out, and there's that little bitty digit at the end, typically, to me, that is my definition when I read the standard. To me, that is what twisted wingtip is that just that tip. And sometimes, even on our geese, if you dig down through the feathers and you look, that's what's twisted. It'll be that very last little digit on their wingtip. And to me, angel wing is like anybody that's bred like Toulouse or Chinas or Africans, we typically blend angel wing, and that's where the whole wing just flips out. And we do have specimens in the United States of the Sebastopols that are even shown, because people don't understand. They see the curly feathers and they think, oh, it's a really good goose, but their wings, they stick straight out of their body. To me, that is a total angel wing, a bird with angel wing. And a twisted wingtip, sometimes you can't even see it. You have to dig through the feathers, because we've got a couple of birds that have it, but you don't notice it unless you grab a hold of them and actually, pull their wing all the way out and look at their twisted wingtip.
Yeah.
But I was just reading, and I think you guys have the American standard there.
Yeah.
In disqualifications, it reads primaries and secondaries. Twisted feathers is a disqualification except in the Sebastopol geese and frizzled chickens.
Yeah.
And that's how it reads in our standard, that it's not a disqualification. I mean, if you're going to go up against a bird that doesn't have a twisted wingtip and yours does, they're going to give the nod to the one that doesn't have it, of course. If the whole package together looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we try to breed our geese. We try to breed them with I really like their heads. They have a wide head, not a very long bill. It's a medium-sized. We don't want it really long, and a nice big eye, and a fairly round head. There's so many geese that we've seen that their heads look flat, and to me it just takes away the elegance of the Sebastopol itself.
Yeah.
And I did notice that and because Facebook, it's a wonderful thing. You can see birds from all over the world. A lot of birds out there, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but their necks seem to be longer than what I prefer, and what the standard kind of calls for is like a medium length big neck. A lot of the Sebastopol's we see have a very long neck, almost not arched like a china, but long like a china.
Yeah, we don't seem to have much of that here.
No, we've got a shorter.
Yeah.
We've got reasonably short necks in the better quality ones here, Terry.
That's good.
They're short and straight. Yeah, but I do understand you do get them in different ones.
Yeah. I just want to jump in. We have a couple of questions. So people have, for you, Terry, around feed and protein. So questions like, what do you recommend feeding for better quality feather, and what levels of protein do you recommend? I know we've had this discussion between ourselves, but yeah, I think it'll be really good to elaborate more on like what we use to cut the feed to bring the protein down, and yeah, would be great.
Well, what we do, and it might not work for anybody else, but what we have found is we start everything on a 22% starter crumble, and then at about 3 weeks we start mixing in the 18% pellet that they will be on the rest of their lives. I do, as soon as, we're in Wisconsin, so it's fairly cold, so like the grass isn't even growing yet, but we already got some goslings out. And, we do get them out as soon as we can on grass, and, if the grass is coming, we'll, get some cut up and put in their, brooder boxes for them. And then as soon as they're about 2 months old, they're totally on the 18% pellet. And then fall, we start adding in whole oats throughout the fall and winter, because oats really do seem to help with feather quality. I don't know what it is, but it seems to help them quite a bit. And a lot of people say they can't get their geese to eat the whole oats. And we have found that if you start them young enough, they'll continue to eat them the rest of their lives. If you have an adult goose, you typically will never get them to eat it. It's an acquired taste. And we do supplement in the wintertime. If it's super cold, we will put some corn in, just when it's 30 or 40 below zero, just for a little added boost for a few days. But they get hay in the wintertime to chew on. Otherwise, in the summer, they're always on pasture. But we feed grain year-round. A lot of people think that they don't need to feed grain if they have enough pasture. And yeah, they'll eat a lot of grass, but it's not going to give them the push and the bloom that they need to make it to their full potential.
Yeah. So when do you cut the protein level down to about 15% or less? Or you just stay up around the 18?
But come fall, we start mixing in, because we try to keep our birds towards spring, when breeding season starts, not light, but we don't want them really heavy like they are sometimes during the winter. So we'll start mixing the oats in, October, November, and throughout the winter, and just to knock it down. And we just mix, like in a 5-gallon bucket, we'll do 3/4 of it will be the 18% pellet, and then the rest will be whole oats, and then we just stir it up and give it to them.
Yeah, with that.
But a lot of people I do know feed like a 14 to a 16% all the time, and we always have fed 18% pellet. That's just seemed right for us.
Yeah, with the corn, Terry, and we've used it for Angora goats as well, but in the colder weather, but only for a period of 6 to 8 weeks. If you just straight corn, and when you're talking about the oats, I haven't done that with the geese at all, but if you're trying to encourage them to eat the oats and it works well with the corn, or if you want to get them onto wheat, and that is to just drop it in the water and they drink water and they put their heads in and eat it. If you leave them on the corn too long, it heats the body up. Well, it did, with the other side, but the corn is good for feather growth, isn't it? Your way of thinking there? Especially for the older birds that are molting,
Yeah, I mean, the oats are really good. I mean, I don't per se feed a lot of corn. It's only for a few weeks in the winter.
Yep.
And that's about it. And we found that if you feed it too long, they just quit eating it altogether. You know, they only like it when it's really cold out.
Yeah. Another say, yeah, I was interested. The oats, that may be just as good. The oats, yeah. Fair enough. What have you got there, Miss?
Yeah.
So I have another question. I find hulled oats, the geese will eat. They don't like the oats with the husk still on them. So yeah, I'm similar. Yeah, so with my guys, I have spoke to numerous people and been given some awesome hints and tips from guys over in the US. So I start my guys off on the 20%. When they're on a starter, like a crumble, I add in about a tablespoon. So I do just a little tablespoon of what we call over here quick cooking oats to get them used to the oats. And I just do that for a week or so. When they get to about 2 weeks of age, I start to add in a lower protein with mine, and I also change the quick cooking oats to the whole rolled oats, which is a traditional porridge. And then as they get older, then I start adding in the grain because they're little. We don't. Yeah, I'm a bit.
Correct.
I don't want my guys to choke, so. Yeah, that's just me being me. I'm OCD. I can't help it.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, and nothing's written in stone because, some people I've talked to over the years are like, we just don't have access to whole oats at our store. We've got barley or we have wheat. Geese love wheat. The ducks love whole wheat. And that works well too. I mean, we've fed it over the years and, they've done fine with it, but it's not something we typically mix in.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is you have to feed what's readily available in your area as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So, just to recap, with regards to genetics, I think a lot of us over here in Australia need to go back and reassess our breeding programs and make use of a smooth-breasted Sebastopol. But when I say smooth-breasted Sebastopol, I mean one that has good quality traits. And they need to have that feather width initially to incorporate into their lines. Is that the suggestion and on track that we should be aiming for?
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't. I mean, if you just come across a smooth-breasted Sebastopol and you think it's going to improve your feather quality, it might not because the feather quality might get better, but it might have a terrible-looking head. It might have a neck that's way too long, and you want to make sure that if you're choosing a smooth-breasted gander, that you incorporate a really good one, and because you don't want to go backwards. And you will get a few smooth-breasted, out of the cross, and you're not going to get 100% curly all the time. And so, you just got to keep really good records, and it's going to work for some people, and some people it just won't work on if they don't understand, exactly what they're looking for. Because, I mean, we've been places before, and, people have said, well, doesn't my goose look like your goose? And it's like, well, it's white and it's Sebastopol, but if you look at their body type, the shape is different, their feather quality is different, and a lot of people just can't see that, and it takes as you guys know, it takes a trained eye to really find a good specimen when you're going through your birds. And yes, we can produce birds that aren't the best quality. Everybody has them,
Yeah.
So we need to select for the least twisted wings in how many feathers are twisted.
It's, like I said, it's just usually that little tip where, I mean, there's only like 3 or 4 on that tip of that wingtip that seem to be, and they're only maybe an inch long, and there's only a few of them.
I think for me, I feel it's more that the Sebastopols are you're always going to get that twisted wingtip. It's something that's never going to be able to be bred
Well,
out
it can start off
100%.
all right, and
Yeah.
then in a couple of years' time, it'll develop sometimes.
Yeah,
Like
they can too. But I think from
Yeah.
my perspective, we need to get away from these softer straight flights. They're the ones that really make the wing look like it is actually angel wing when it's not. Whereas if we can get our guys to have the softer feathers that come out and protrude out of their wing, it's only going to have minimal visual appearance of the twisted wingtip, and it will help to educate people that the Sebastopol is a very unique breed. It's not your standard breed. It's something that throughout history we have genetically modified and bred to have a certain appearance, and in doing that, that gives the bird a genetic that it is what it is. That is the Sebastopol goose. They were line bred many, many years ago for meat, and their feather for down and things like that. So I think, having a really good re-evaluation of the breed, and it's great that we've got UK representatives, US representatives, and us here in Australia all trying to band together to, get this bird everywhere up to where it needs to be.
and just to finish that, Kerry, like if they made it a fault and people disqualification, the culling levels would be extremely high in Sebastopol geese, where there's no need to, because we're actually breeding a bird that doesn't need to fly, and it's the only goose that you would allow it in but it's got no requirements for flying. It can't fly to save itself. We're breeding an ornamental bird to look how it looks, and which we do in different animals and budgerigars and things like that. So I think it's a bad thing if it's introduced as a straight out disqualification. I mean, you can always, as a breeder, you can always try and select that way, and maybe you'll hit the jackpot. But so far, I haven't seen that happen.
Yeah, and I believe you said, Michael, just a second ago that sometimes as the birds mature, they'll get, even if they didn't have a twisted wingtip like their first and second year, they might produce it their third or fourth or fifth year. And I think a lot of it has to do with, if you have a really early spring and the grass is flushing really heavily, there's a lot of protein in fresh grass. And I'm sure you've noticed over the years, one year you might have your geese that seem to drop feathers all at one time, and they molt heavy. And then the next year they might molt really, really slow and take forever to molt out. And I think the birds, when they molt really heavy, sometimes that almost makes them come back in with a little twisted wingtip, because they're doing it so quickly, because the protein level of the grass is high, and we don't lock them off the grass. They can eat it whenever they want. Because we've had some over the years are like, yes, they didn't have that issue before, but they seem to develop it as they've aged.
Because the feathers growing quickly when they're on a really good grass and everything, and that's, can be the time that makes it happen. And the worst part is for people that have bred and even been winning, and they've got great birds, and suddenly it's reduced. You've already bred with that bird for 2 or 3 years sometimes, and that's, the genetics are there. And you're right with that molting. Some years they produce, the feathers come out a lot quicker in the different feed, and the feathers are growing quicker. So, and because of the way we've bred them to look ornamental and to hang down, that's the way we want them. We want them to all hang down and not those straight feathers.
Well,
yes, you're exactly right. Melissa, you got some more questions?
No, that's just people agreeing with comments.
Is there anyone out there that's going to send any more questions in? About that they'd like to know, if we get some down.
So are there any more questions that people would like to raise or say? Anybody here have questions they want to... Yeah. You can get
So the question is about rolled oats and whole oats. Kerry, rolled oats, we used to feed the cattle the rolled oats. It's a good make porridge of it, but and associated with climate.
It's to get them to have that taste. Yeah, so if you give it to them when they're younger, they develop that taste. And then as they get older, they're used to having that in their diet. Yeah.
Just quickly, when we've spoken about what to do with the feathers, cascading and falling off the back of the bird, but then moving around to the front and the curl on the chest, what can you do there to increase the levels of curliness on the chest of the bird?
Oh, you mean to breed up?
Yeah. Like we've got some birds where maybe it comes halfway up the chest, and then we look at your birds, Melissa, and it's like all the way up. What can you do to increase the amount of curl on the chest?
That's a good question, and a lot of that from my experience, and also from speaking with Michael.
Did Terry hear the question?
Yeah, he did.
Oh,
So
well.
he could hear. Yeah, it's genetic. It's genetic.
Genetics.
It's selectively picking for that quality, and that's something that Michael has been able to achieve. So the highest feather and fullness and volume of feather up as high up the neck as possible, but also those softer tail feather shafts so that they plume down, because you'll often get varieties that still have that smooth breasted little bit of point or wavy feather. They don't have the full coming down. So it's selecting those.
Terry, you'd agree, like, you can't fix everything in one go, but over the years I've selected for 15 or 20 years to get that higher up the neck, the feathers, and also I've selected for in the tail feathers as well to get them hanging so you don't get any strong staff. But it takes years of selection, and numbers and breeding, which like any livestock, you've got to do numbers, cull hard.
Correct. And you guys probably all know, anybody that races Sebastopols knows that that's a breed that if you overcrowd them, even from the first couple of weeks of their existence, you're really doing a disservice to the breed, because they're not going to reach their full potential, because they're always going to be, picked on. They're going to be overcrowded. They need to get out and they need to move around and flap their wings. And I think that if you can get them outside, even if it's cool out a couple times a day, to let them run around and flap their wings, that really helps strengthen their wing care, and hopefully help keep all of their wing issues at bay. Between that, genetics, quality feed, trying to figure out what works for your line of when to cut it down in protein. Those are all things that you have to, it's trial and error. What works one year might not work the next year. It's kind of like incubating eggs. What works one year won't work the next year.
100%.
You've been in it a while, Terry, was it?
Yeah.
And we're lucky we don't get the weather in most of Australia that's cold as what you get. But that's right. And if you're overcrowded and that, you get bored goslings chewing on the other one's feathers and that. So the more room they got, the better they're going to end up. And even your adult birds, when they're molting, if you crowd them too much, you're going to have problems.
Yep.
We have another question. So when you mentioned about record keeping, Terry, David Seal has asked, can you expand on record keeping?
Yes. My daughter has a toe punch chart for every single year, every single pen. So all of our pens have, like the tags you put in cattle's ear that have their numbers on them. We use those tags and we have them on the pens. So when we collect the eggs, everything is written on what pen it comes out of. And in December, when my daughter puts the breeding pens together, she, does the chart of who's in each pen, and then she knows the lineage of them, because as soon as they're hatched, we toe punch, on their webs.
While you're on the toe punch, sorry to interrupt you, the toe punching, does it work? When I've toe punched geese before, it seems to grow back over with me. Are you using a hot toe punch, or?
No, it's just a little toe punch. It looks like a paper punch, but it's tiny.
Like
and the trick is,
go on.
When you toe punch it, you have to physically make sure that you've got that little flap of skin removed, because the first few years we had them grow back because we never pulled out that, we did it and then put it back in the pen and we thought it was done. You have to physically make sure that little hunk of skin is removed.
Yeah, see, waterfowl, see, fowls, okay. Yeah, I used to put a mash probe in there for the first year or so and then take the mash probe out, sort of thing. But, you can get a couple of eggs, you've got to be careful.
We do. But we also use the seamless bands that you can order through the American Bantam Association, or the metal bands that you put on. We use those as well.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And then we also use colored zip ties. Like when we put our breeding pens together, we'll put like purple zip ties on the one pen and red on the next pen and yellow on the next pen. It's just another form of identification.
Yeah. Getting good quality coloured ones that last more than 12 months is a bit hard out here at the moment, but anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, where to go? Sorry.
Yeah, no, these are good questions. Now, with your breeding, Terry, do you let your geese sit or do you use incubators? And what incubators do you use? Just curious, that's all.
We never let them sit because we tried it one year and they are too stupid to get off the nest most of the time and they just smother the goslings. So we incubate everything and we use the GQF Sportsman style incubators. We've got 2 of those, and then we have a Brincia as well. And all of them work well. We incubate with their eggs on their side with a turner, and then I do hand turn once a day, sometimes twice a day, depending upon how much time I've got.
Yeah, and for the hobbyist, when it's commercial, it's different, I think. But if you incubate them, you can incubate them under a Muscovy duck, or put them in the incubator, and as soon as you can pick the fertility after 4 or 5 days, once you get your eye in, maybe a little longer, get them out under a Muscovy duck or a turkey, but never let them hatch them. Take them 5 days before they're due to hatch and put them in your and the still air incubators, I find, but now I've cut my size down and just doing little ones, is the best. The Brincia one, we can't get those drawers out here now, or I haven't been able to, but that still air ones, they hatch better in that, and then I take them, and I've got it very close to air, and so I check them during the night. I move them out of that when they hatch because they can be quite wet, which is fine. They still will dry, but I take them out, and then I move them into a forced fan air one. I've got some ostrich incubators that I've converted and slowed the fan down a bit. But it's still too fast, like they're hatching, but once they hatch, they're at the right temperature in 15 minutes, they're blow dry. And just for the hobbyists that are out there, but putting them out under a turkey or a Muscovy duck, if you've got those, once the eggs are fertile, if you're like I just, I'm not wasting time with infertiles and mark the eggs. You might, if you only got 3 fertile eggs and you've marked week 1 and then week 2, but once you're in, so you've got the numbers on the eggs and then bring them in at 5 days before they hatch. So there's no problem. If you can nearly hatch or a bit of hot water.
Have you found if you let your Muscovies or turkeys hatch them, will they kill them?
Not always, but I don't take the chance. I've had that happen, Yeah, not always. Sometimes they're really good mothers, and sometimes, and I've had turkey hens for guards just walking around with the goslings, and once you get a dozen under them, you can put 30 out there if you've got heat, and there's predators, air predators, and they're good mothers like that. But you will get your mistakes if you let them hatch them, but not all the time. Sometimes they hatch them fine. And you got a question there, Graham? Yeah. We're going to fill up a few more questions here. You got any? I think the people are enjoying it, but anyway, Terry, but the information they're getting.
That's good.
If they write in questions, some of those little questions for the hobbyists, they need to know.
Yeah.
Well, like my grandpa always said, there's no stupid question.
No. And you'll be surprised at some of the questions you get, but it's quick to explain.
Yeah. No, there isn't. I think we've covered off on most of the ones that I
There's
can.
one here from Charles about sex linked.
Yes.
With the colour, and the white, you're going.
Question, do I Now I take it, do you use the smooth-breasted goose to curly-breasted gander in separate mating to the smooth-breasted general goose? Why I ask is to see if the crosses are sex-linked, as I noticed Terry has only mentioned using smooth-breasted gander to curly-breasted goose.
Did you hear that, Terry?
You can read that one.
We'll get Melissa to read out so it's clear, yeah, to make it clear.
So there was a question here that says, now I take it, do you use a smooth-breasted goose to a curly-breasted gander in a separate mating to the smooth-breasted goose or gander? And then they ask, why I ask is to see if the crosses are sex-linked, as I noticed Terry has only mentioned using a smooth-breasted gander to a smooth-breasted goose. I think there's several things in there. So I know here in Australia, it's very hard to get the sex-linked outcomes as in breeding two pure white Sebastopols. We don't have that. A lot of that sex lineage has gone because people haven't concentrated on the breed, and then what people did have that were sex-linked, once it got out into the community, people just let it breed with whatever over however many 50 or 60 years. So we've sort of lost that. Yeah, so adding back in a smooth-breasted, would that help?
I think
I don't think that would help your sex link at all, because if you come across a white Sebastopol, you cannot assume it's from white lineage all the way through. It could have been 2 generations ago out of a gray or out of a buff. We've been pretty lucky. Ours are pretty much sex link. The Puriello ones are the little ganders, and then the females are the ones that have the grayish color on their heads and on their back. And we've only ever used a smooth-breasted gander over the curly females. We've never used a smooth-breasted female at all. We've always used
I think that's the question. That's the question.
Brian's got something to say.
That's the question I think that man's asking, is that you don't use smooth-breasted females in your breeding programs.
No, we never have.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah. See, and I did this year, I used a smooth-breasted goose, and I got the most amazing full curly girl that has those gorgeous wide feathers. So yeah, it's interesting, but it also goes back to that trial and error.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and I think it's just, we're not probably opposed to using it. We've just never had that, we've just always used the gander.
Yeah.
In the program.
It's that accidental mating when you get some of the best ones. Oh boy, how did that one get in there? Oh, I didn't realise yet.
Yeah.
You got another question there, Grant? Claire?
No.
No. Now I have a question. It's to do with regards to coloured Sebastopols. Now, so many people approach us here in Australia for coloured Sebastopols. Now, I know the UK standard lists buff as a colour. However, there's different variances in what is referred to as a buff coloured goose. Now, we know that when you go to genetics and you breed 2 buffs, you get different outcomes. You can get your greys, your splits, your pies, and then back to whites, and the list just goes on. Thoughts?
It's like working continually with your buffs.
What's the raise American buffs?
What was that?
We used to raise American buffs, and the colors on the American buffs look so different if you keep them in the shade or if you keep them in the sun.
Exactly.
That's the big, huge variance we have found when it comes to the buff color. And we also raise buff call ducks, and some of them are a real deep, almost like an apricot color buff, and the other ones, some of them are really light colored buffs, and it comes down to your personal preference, I think, for that, because it's not, even though there's the standard as far as the buff color, some judges like the ones that are super dark, some like them when they're really light. So there's always that interpretation of the standard that everybody, they interpret it differently.
Yeah, that's right. The buff in Australia, because we get a lot more sun, I think, than a lot of places over there. We're here now, I've got a coat on, but we're sweating here, we're getting up to 28, 30 degrees Celsius or something. But they do, I found I was breeding some buff, Chinese, but after 3 or 4 months they've bleached out, unless you shed them or have them in a yard with a wisteria one or something with plenty of shade. And that's one of the problems from my point of view, They bleach out even our grey Toulouse things with some of the hot sun we get here, but they certainly still hold their colour reasonably well. But the Sebastopols and buff ones doesn't seem to work for me anyway.
There are some gorgeous buff Sebastopols in the United States. We've seen a lot of them at shows. They're not in the standard, and it would be nice, to have them accepted. But they have to work together. The breeders do to get them to the, get all the qualifications done, and it takes time. And as you know, a lot of dedication, because they're not like geese aren't like chickens. They don't start laying eggs at 5 months and breeding, and you can get a couple generations in a year. Geese take a long time.
You only breed once a year. You're lucky to get 2 clutches and get some out, and that's where it is. It's top. And so, and somebody only asked me about it. They get something in the standard. Said, well, get started, and you've got to do numbers to get there quick. So I think don't muck around breeding 4 or 5. You need to breed 50 or 100 at least a year if you want to get there quick. And have a good. There's a good market for the meat here.
We're working on buff China right now with some breeders to try to get them into the American standard of poultry of perfection here in the U.S. So we're working with buff Chinas.
Okay.
Still here trying. I haven't tried to get them in, but I do like the buff Chinas, but the bleaching is a worry.
Now, I do feel a bit bad. I'm really sorry, Graham, because we sort of skipped an introduction for yourself. So we have Graham Hicks, who was invited from the UK as an international specialist waterfowl judge here. Now, I would like to ask Graham a couple of questions with regards to the buff. What is the buff that they're talking about in the UK standards that Australia seems to model our standards off?
They're American buff, orange buff, not Brecon buff. And in Australia, you don't have a buff gene.
No.
So you're not Australia can't make a buff because they haven't got the buff gene in geese.
See, our buff is more of a lighter browny colour.
There is a few getting around that there's a few breeds that are just buffs.
Yeah, but if you're going to get a rich colour like when you get an Asian buff colour.
It's a different colour. I'll show you. It is a totally different colour. But yeah,
So we
but
don't
thank
buff,
you.
we just
No, yeah, it's still in project, yeah. Because unfortunately here in Australia, for us to import anything, it's roughly $270,000 odd dollars, and there's no guarantee that there'll be any outcomes out of it. And they need to be, so you have to get, eggs have to be quarantined, so no live animal can come in, from what I've been told, through New South Wales Agriculture.
Geese are different to fowls too. The fowls, that was easy, but with geese, because you've got to get so many eggs, I think you've got to send eggs over into the quarantine to get them hatched.
Yes.
And you know what it's like trying to hatch in an incubator at the best of times, and they need a certain number, and they put centrals in with them.
Yeah.
There, so to get the numbers of goslings, so they can mix goslings from over there, would be a big job from here to get eggs that could get hatched and do it to get them in.
Yeah, and then they grow them out to 9 weeks of age, and if just one from that whole group has something that's quarantined, they all get euthanized.
Yeah, the hatching them's the hardest. And somebody to have enough eggs to get them over there, and they're going to be flown over, get them to hatch. Forget about $200,000. It'll be a bit more than that, I think, by the time if you can. You'd need to breed the flock up.
And they have to be quarantined.
And
And
all the blood tests and things. Well, depending on what country where they're going to send them to do it. But because they've still got to be able to get them back here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty hard job.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're lucky we've got the ones in when the Captain Cook come out. We got the first few loads. What have you got there? Any more questions from in here though? Get your questions answered.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any more questions from people that are here? You need to speak right up. Yep.
No, that's only a choice.
That's just
Trial and
They
error.
choose to only use smooth again. It doesn't. You can use females. They choose to do it. It's certain people that
It
change.
works for them that way.
Yeah.
There was,
And some people would see it as, well, if I have a gander, I don't need to use him every year, whereas if I have a goose, she's going to be laying eggs every year as well.
yeah, Terry, I think explained it wasn't necessarily. It was just their choice to do it like that. Yeah, and you wouldn't if all you had was a female, and if you wanted to, you'd use it, I'd imagine. But yeah, the gander's the way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're not even using our gander this year.
Yeah.
The smooth-breasted gander.
What do you mean with the Goslings? You can look after them.
Yep.
Well, you're going to get something, I think, Terry. How many Goslings do you usually get out a year, roughly, Terry, like with your flock?
Well, last year was terrible. We only had a few, but we've had as many as 75, which isn't a lot, but for us that's a good number. It's a good manageable
Melissa got
number.
75 out this year, she nearly have an heart attack. What's the feed be like?
No, not the feed,
Oh, right.
the capacity. I work full time. This is a hobby.
What do you mean we do too? Go on.
Yes,
Go on.
yes. No, it's fine.
Yeah, I don't tell her how you're talking about it.
So, yeah.
What you got there?
So no, I don't think there's. Oh, sorry, you were reading. I was
No,
just
no,
going through to see if there was any more questions people had posted.
Because we got to go soon.
Another one for Terry. So I think with regards to colour, so do you guys have developmental classes?
For showing.
Yeah, for showing. So it says, what should Australian standards be putting in for these? Hang on, sorry. No, I'll go all the way up. In relation to coloured Sebastopols, now I notice there are blues, saddlebacks, greys, lavenders, for instance. What should the Australian standard do in putting these colours in the standard out of these questions? Any colour is allowed, meaning should we, as in how are the breeders in the US doing it? Are they doing it as any colour, or do they have separate colours?
You can, in the United States, you can show any colored Sebastopol that you want, and you can enter it. I mean, if you think you have a lavender, enter it as a lavender. If you think you have a buff, a gray, a saddleback, you enter it as you want. Unfortunately, it'll win its variety, as far as what the color variety is, but it won't go any further because only whites are accepted in the United States. But I believe they're going to start working on the grays first to get them in. And if Laura Huey is watching, she, I think, is spearheading that. I think she was going to be on tonight.
Yeah.
Because she started the Sebastopol Club here in the United States, and I think the group as a whole is going to start working on getting the gray Sebastopol into the standard.
Yeah.
But it's a process, probably like it is in any other country. So many you have to write the standard, you have to pay the fee, you have to have so many qualifying needs with so many different breeders. There's affidavits that have to be signed. You have to be a member of APA for, I believe it's 5 years. You have to be breeding them for 5 years. So you just can't have them 1 year and say, oh, let's put them in the standard. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
It's a very...
So they're only about 30 years now. I think they've got about...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always been cheeky,
Yeah.
saying that he's got about 30 years of breeding colour.
But you're going to take a long time. But what I tried to do here was, instead of having a set saddleback colour and that, because there's a lot of people who have just got colours, a mixture of colours, and some of the ag shows, when you get in now with the Australian Poultry Standards, they just want you only to have things in their poultry standard, but agriculture shows, and they're looking for entries of poultry in there, and you've got breeders that have got them, the coloured ones, and they like them, they just want to take it along to the show, and it gets people interested. I tried to get them to put in some just an AC colour, any colour. So in other words, the bird can be any colour, it can be a mixture of colour, and it's just judged on type and feather quality, and make sure, it's right. With a few basics, you could state that it needs to have an orange bill and orange legs if that's what you're going to end up with. But otherwise, the feathers can be any colour. Obviously, the pit game in Australia, and they can be any colour. They judge them on type and muscle and all sorts of things like that. So the Sebastopols, if it's got extremely good coloured feathers, and some of the coloured ones have better feather than some, like as good or better than the whites, and it'd be a pity if they could just have any coloured class, an AC, any colour.
I'm just going to plug for a moment. So anybody that is in Sydney, please come to the Sydney Royal Easter Show. Go to the Animal Nursery and you will see some gorgeous, full curly coloured Sebastopols that are on display. Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. Melissa's going down with her phone to get a video of them, and she'll
I'm going down with my trailer to take the film with me. I keep saying, please, Michael. No, it's all good.
There's some really good quality gray Sebastopols here in the United States, and I believe Barbara Rudolph had some, or still has some, in the U.S. And they were gorgeous, and they were dark gray, almost like a steel gray.
Yeah. Well, what's your definition of is a grey? Like we've got the brown Chinese and the grey Toulouse, but it's basically that brown colour. Is that, or you're calling like that bluey grey, silvery colour for you're calling grey over there?
Well, the gray is kind of like a grey Toulouse. That's kind of how they're going to, I think how they're going to write the standard for it, that it would be the colour of like a grey Toulouse.
Well, yeah, because I've been talking to Melissa about it, and I've got the gander down there, and then I'm trying to make sure we get a video, and but it's got like the grey Toulouse brown colour, or the grey head neck, and that, but then you come into the body, and it's a silvery, bluey grey, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah. So you either got to get in the standard that cuts off and takes over from here, or you've got to get it all one colour. And so the neck and up the neck, if it's going to be a grey or a silver, it needs to be, if they want it all one colour.
Yeah.
And that's numbers and records, photographic records, and dates each year as they hatch, when they're goslings and as they're growing.
Yes.
Sorry, that's good to get that bit in there, Terry, so we're sort of, because I've already been looking, we're going to have to get if they want to do it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just got AC, it can be any colour. Well, then they put it in the show and the kids can take their favourite bits along, and it's quite good ones. But anyway, that's our job over here.
Did Graham or Claire have anything else that you guys would like
No,
to?
not for me. I've asked you just about the feathers and the protein.
Did you want to give a bit of your experience?
Well, I think Terry's given us all the tips to how here in Australia needs to start a breeding program and monitor the marking and documenting it.
Photographic.
Where they're coming from and what's producing what, which is what obviously Terry does, to keep a closer record
From the time they hatch.
of how you're breeding them and and follow the generations up on breeding. So it's good, a lot of tips to what they should start.
And you need a group of people doing it. It's better if you're not going to be able to breed 100 yourself. If 2 or 3 you can band together, you'll get there a lot quicker.
Yeah. So I think you've given a lot of tips, and it's obviously on selection.
Yep. And I mean, and don't be afraid to do a little heavy line breeding. I mean, if you've got a really good goose and a really good gander, but they're heavily related, you might put them together and hit the jackpot. Yeah. You might put them together and get junk, but you might hit the jackpot.
Yeah, you can always add a bit of different blood if you're starting to get fertility and hatchability problems. But breed with them while they're producing. If they're producing good ones, and get as many out. Oh, there you go.
So we just have a photo. I will put it on the live, but I'm just gonna show Terry on FaceTime up close.
Ooh, very nice.
Yeah, so that is one of the Sebastopols that Michael Peel has bred. Yes, and
Very nice.
some of the
Look how
offspring
Look how
from
fine that
her.
curl is. Look how
She
fine
is
that curl is
stunning.
on that chest.
Yes,
Yeah.
and some of the offspring that Maria Mercado has bred, and I have bred from her, is at the show here in the nursery and also on display downstairs. Yeah. Now I'll just see if I can get this up. I hope everybody can see.
Just tuck it again.
So that's the Sebastopol that we're talking about, which her name is Bluey. She's stunning. We might actually see if we can load a video up of what we've been talking about with the coloured Sebies down in the nursery over the next day or so as well. Yeah.
Now, how long have you worked on the colored Sebastopols? Like that line right there.
Those are the last 20, I've had them 50 years, the Sebastopols there, in the last 25, the years get that quick, between 25 and 30 years. But I haven't done any record keeping, I've just run because there's so much work if you're going to show them and that. But the wife always likes them, running around and the kids and people don't see them. And because I do the animal nursery, the waterfowl section, I've been able to bring them into the show and people see them there, and the interest is incredible. But
Everybody would like to have a flock of birds looking like that one in that picture that Melissa just showed. That's gorgeous.
I should always get going on me now and then. I'm trying to reduce my numbers of geese out there, Terry, but yeah. But I'll keep that 3 or 4 that get home. There's just so much work. But if you've got it like on a pond and don't overcrowd your pens and that and give them the room and that, so 3 or 4 is good, I'd love really having 50. But I'm working on Africans at the moment and I've got a flock of 50 and sort of I just had a good hatch last year, so I'm pushing up with that. But yeah, I'll see how we go.
Terry, my thoughts on coloured is that I think the first thing we need to do is get the whites right and then worry about colours another day. Same as the cool duck world is they're all worrying about new colours and pretty colours and they lose everything else on the standard colours.
Correct. Yep. There's a few strictly white Sebastopol breeders in the United States, but there's very few around anymore. So many people do the colors because people like the colors, and I get it. If they're gonna produce them and sell down, people like the colors, and
they're pretty.
I get that.
They're pretty and they're easier to sell. Yes, I understand. Yep. Yeah. Good. Okay. I think we're done.
Yeah.
I think we're done, and I think we can just have a little bit of a chat.
Yeah.
Within our
And regroup. Yeah.
Yeah, regroup. So.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody. Thank you, Terry. I know I haven't been the best at knowing exactly what's going on, but I wasn't sure what facilities and that were available here, and when I'm 14 hours away, it's a bit hard. But no, thank you so much for your time, and I will. We will gather again and do some more actual streaming where people can actually see yourself and myself, and I will catch up with Laura and a couple of other people that we chat often about colours and how they do things, because I think the more that all of us Sebastopol lovers and breeders can share, it's going to be better for the breed all round.
Oh, definitely. It's also the benefits to breed, and and as you know, most of it is a hobby for everybody, but if you can try to breed them to the standard the best you can, I think you're gonna do well for the breed itself.
Yeah. Alrighty. If there's any questions that we haven't answered, they'll come up in the feed. I'm not able to see it because of how my screen's set up. But yeah, we will get back to everybody. But again, thank you for your
Sounds
time.
good. Well, nice meeting everybody.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You guys have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye. And I just want to thank everybody else that is here. Michael for all the support, Graham and Claire for their knowledge, and also there's other people that are here in the background that are part of the Australian Sebastopol Breeders Group. I want to thank them too. So Tanya and Maria, Thank you.
I think we need to thank Melissa for doing all the research and getting all this up and running and getting it there. It's a bad job. All right. Next year all the poultry fellas will be up here doing the live stream.
Yeah. Yeah. But look, there's a lot
What
more
about
things.
this one up again?
There will be a lot more things that we'll try and cover off on. And yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I think, well, Claire did the beginning and everything this morning. She heard me voice.